So, welcome everyone to our exploration of the transformative power of Samantabhadra's King of Aspiration prayers. This week, the second week, we'll be focusing on verses 47 to 54, which is all about the immense benefits of reciting and practicing this prayer. And this week's image is the lotus blooming in the muddy water, a classic Buddhist image of the possibility of enlightenment in our ordinary world that is filled with suffering. As we discussed last week, the King of Aspiration prayers is considered a jewel of the Mahayana Buddhist tradition, cherished across various schools for its profound teachings on bodhicitta and the path of the bodhisattva. Originating from the Gandavyuha Sutra, which is part of the Avatamsaka Sutra, it encapsulates the aspirations of Samantabhadra, a bodhisattva who embodies practice and virtue, and serves as a guiding light for practitioners, outlining the path to enlightenment through the cultivation of limitless compassion and altruistic intentions towards all sentient beings. It's widely practiced across many Buddhist traditions, especially in East Asia, and also the main practice during the Tibetan Monlam prayer festivals in Bodh Gaya. So to begin, I'd like to follow Zonzo Khensa Rinpoche's example and start by inviting us all to tune our motivations, as Rinpoche puts it. So to get a sense of what this means, let me tell a story of when I was young. I went to school in London, a Church of England school, and each day before school lunch, the headmaster would lead us all in saying grace, which was, "For what we are about to receive, may the Lord make us truly thankful." That's a standard Christian idea of grace, cultivating appreciation and gratitude. And as we now know from positive psychology and the study of happiness, if that really could be boiled down to just one thing, it really is we're going to be happy to the extent that we can be grateful and appreciate our lives. And we can contrast that with our ordinary mindset of consumer or user, where we expect to be impressed by a product or service, and if something isn't working to our liking, all the responsibility is on the person who made the product or provides the service, and there's nothing on us as the user to enjoy the experience. So no surprise that everyone is so unhappy in this consumer society. So yes, aspiration, saying grace, that is very good. And the Dharma has something even better. And we have something called the three supreme methods: good in the beginning, the middle, and the end. So there's a popular quotation from Longchenpa: begin with bodhicitta, do the main practice without concepts, conclude by dedicating the merit. These, together and complete, are the three vital supports for progressing on the path to liberation. So, tuning our motivation for a Mahayana text such as this is all about really bringing to mind and cultivating bodhicitta, the aspiration to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. And the good in the middle, the good in the end, they will also be part of this prayer, and we will come to those in future weeks, right? So we'll have quite a lot to discuss when it comes to practicing without concepts. And also at the end, we shall also talk about dedication. So just a little more on bodhicitta. The idea of may I obtain supreme enlightenment to promote the good of all beings and establish them in supreme and perfect enlightenment. So we want to offer both relative and ultimate benefit to others. It is said that without ultimate benefit, without the absolute bodhicitta, just having relative aspirations can degenerate into pity and sentimentality. Rinpoche often calls this the philanthropic mindset, where we consider ourselves good and others less than ourselves. But likewise, if you have the absolute only without the relative, it can lead to nihilism and a lack of desire to engage other sentient beings for their benefit in the ordinary world. So hence I think we see in the modern world a lot of focus on engaged Buddhism, and how can we as Buddhists not just practice, but really seek to be of benefit in the relative world. So there's a teaching Rinpoche's offered called work as practice, where we can apply this motivation to anything that we do when we're working. And he suggests, as part of setting our good in the beginning, some verses from Shantideva's Bodhicharyavatara, so from chapter 3. May I be a guard for those who are protectorless, a guide for those who journey on the road. For those who wish to go across the water, may I be a boat, a raft, a bridge. May I be an isle for those who yearn for land, a lamp for those who long for light, for all those who need a resting place, a bed. For those who need a servant, may I be their slave. So maybe just take a moment to set your intention for our time together during the next hour. Okay, and just to emphasize, in the Mahayana, it really is, I guess, a threefold shift from an ordinary kind of worldly aspiration. Firstly, we're very much shifting from a focus on benefit for ourselves to a benefit for others. Secondly, we're moving away from a focus just on some sentient beings, our friends, our family, people we like, to all sentient beings. Right? It's truly a universal aspiration, which requires us to go beyond tribalism, go beyond the usual kinds of boundaries we have in our social and political worlds. And finally, it's from a relative benefit, a worldly benefit, to enlightenment, right? Going beyond ordinary benefit. And we'll talk about this more in future weeks, but this is the difference between things like ordinary generosity and what in the Mahayana is called the paramita of generosity, the practice of the 6 paramitas. And one of the things we'll keep seeing in this prayer is that going beyond the ordinary to something that may be considered a paramita means going beyond ordinary conceivability, which is going to be a big theme this week, as in all weeks. And just in the spirit of aspiration, the idea of something infinite, which can at times seem maybe more than we can handle, I want to share a story of starfish on the beach. Strolling along the edge of the sea, a man catches sight of a young woman who appears to be engaged in a ritual dance. She stoops down, then straightens to her full height, casting her arm out in an arc. Drawing closer, he sees that the beach around her is littered with starfish, and she is throwing them one by one into the sea. He lightly mocks her. There are stranded starfish as far as the eye can see, for miles up the beach. What difference can saving a few of them possibly make? Smiling, she bends down and once more tosses a starfish out over the water, saying serenely, "It certainly makes a difference for this one." Okay, so this week is about benefit, which is what we will accomplish as the outcome of practicing this King of Aspiration prayers. But there's several related terms, including intention, motivation, aspiration, even merit. So I'd like to spend some time talking about these, because I think it's going to be useful to distinguish them both for this week and future weeks. So firstly, aspiration. What is an aspiration? I guess we can think about it as the goal or the what of our practice. It refers to a strong desire to achieve something, typically of a lofty or spiritual nature. It's the longing for something that lies beyond our current state or our current ability. So in Buddhism, aspiration is closely associated with the development of bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, where we are aspiring to attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. This is the bedrock of the Mahayana, where we really want to assist all beings in overcoming suffering. And just as a way of making sense of this, I'm going to use the analogy of climbing a mountain. So here, aspiration or goal might be like the goal of reaching the summit. not just for the sake of personal achievement, but also to inspire others, or perhaps to raise awareness for a cause. In this analogy, the aspiration is like the desire for enlightening all beings in Buddhism, and the climber's longing to reach the top is something that's beyond their current capabilities or state. Okay, so next, motivation or inspiration, which is the why for our journey. It's the driving force behind our actions. It's what propels us to move towards our goal. Motivations can be intrinsic, so coming from within, driven by personal satisfaction or desire for self-improvement, or extrinsic, driven by external rewards or to avoid negative outcomes. So in Buddhism, motivation is the key to sustaining our practice and ethical conduct. The motivation is always given great importance, with the emphasis on cultivating wholesome motivations that lead to the welfare of ourselves and others. For instance, we're encouraged to meditate not just for personal peace of mind, but as a means to develop qualities like compassion and wisdom that can benefit others. In the mountain climbing example, motivation would be the climber's driving force to embark on the challenging journey, perhaps an intrinsic desire to overcome personal limits or to experience the beauty and solitude of the mountains, or perhaps extrinsic factors like the recognition that comes from achievements, or maybe to support a charitable cause. Okay, third, intention. Right, this is the how or the approach in our day-to-day journey. Intention is defined as the purpose or attitude behind our action. It's more specific than motivation and can be seen as the immediate thought or aim that leads to our action. Intentions are shaped by both aspirations and motivations, and they play a crucial role in determining the karmic consequences of actions in Buddhism. So in Buddhism, intention is central to understanding karma. Actions are said to be morally determinative based on the intention behind them. So if an action outwardly appears beneficial, if it's motivated by selfishness or greed or delusion, it's nevertheless considered unwholesome. And this cultivation of right intention is an important part of the Noble Eightfold Path, emphasizing intentions of renunciation, goodwill, not harming others. For the mountain climber, intention would be the climber's attitude in undertaking the climb. Perhaps he or she might wish to climb respectfully, minimizing environmental impact, or helping fellow climbers in need, reflecting ethical considerations similar to a Buddhist focus on right intention. The climber's intentions ensure that their journey up the mountain is aligned with their values and their aspiration. And, I will say, even as Buddhists, we should always be a little cautious and self-reflective, because one thing that's all too common, for example, is people may go to a Buddhist teaching where the aspiration is to learn, to study for the sake of enlightenment, and yet there's often a crowding to sit in the best seats at the front, right by the teacher. So the immediate intention may not always be properly aligned with aspiration. So I think it's a good thing for us to check. So in summary, the aspiration, the what or the goal, sets our vision for our spiritual journey. In this case, focusing us on the ultimate goal of enlightening all sentient beings. The motivation or inspiration is our why, which is our fuel for our journey, which provides our day-to-day energy and reasons for engaging in our practice, whether it's meditation or ethical living or studying Dharma. It helps us overcome obstacles and sustains us through challenges. And I think as practitioners, it's very important for us to make sure that we stay inspired. And for example, in one of the questions in Rinpoche's Vancouver teachings, he said, if we're losing inspiration, sometimes the best answer might even be to take a break from our practice. If in that way we can come back refreshed and more inspired. So our intention, our how, and our approach guides our moment-to-moment choices, ensuring actions are aligned with our ethical and spiritual goals. And in each case, right, as Rinpoche said, you are your own master, these are things that we can take accountability for in our own path, in our own spiritual journey. And as we reflect on our journey, most of us, when we're first interested or attracted to Buddhism, there is some kind of initial energy or motivation or inspiration. And then it moves over time to a second stage where we familiarize ourselves more through practice or study, and we intentionally cultivate an aspiration, which in the Mahayana is an actual practice, hence this prayer. And then based on that, in our day-to-day action, we aim to integrate our aspiration into our intentions and our actions. So there's a progression from an initial attraction to a deep intentional practice. And this reflects both our personal journey of growth and the structured approach to the path. So, again, just to reflect on where we might be right now in our journey. Our initial attraction or motivation can be for a variety of motivations. Perhaps for some it's inner peace or understanding of life's sufferings or dealing with illness or death among friends or family, or perhaps our own impending death, or perhaps curiosity about meditation and mindfulness practices. And so this initial attraction is fueled by a form of motivation that seeks something beyond our current understanding or experience. So whether it's relief from suffering, existential answers, psychological well-being, perhaps even exploring experiences beyond the ordinary. And then as we become more familiar with the teachings and the practices, our engagement leads us to a deeper reflection on our purpose, both for our life and for our practice, and the broader implications for our actions. And in the Mahayana, we're encouraged to cultivate bodhicitta, again, the aspiration for us to attain enlightenment for the sake of all beings. And then with that clear aspiration established, we can then turn to our actions and aim to align those with our broader vision. Okay, so we've talked a bit about the what, the why, the how of the path. So let's talk a little bit about merit and benefit, which is very much this week's topic. So in Buddhism, merit, it refers to the positive energy or karmic potential generated by good deeds, virtuous actions, and practices aligned with Dharma. Meritorious actions include giving, so dana, moral conduct, shila, and meditation, bhavana, among others. And merit is seen as crucial for our spiritual progress and for achieving favorable rebirths. And it has a very significant role in traditional Buddhist countries. It's seen as internally making us happy and virtuous in our minds, externally giving rise to good circumstances such as long life, health, wealth, as well as character and abilities that we're born with. That's all seen as arising from merits we've accumulated in the past, and vice versa, if our situation is not so good, from demerits in the past. The merits and demerits we've accumulated in the past may take a while to bear fruit, and may only show up in the next life or future lives. It's stated in the Buddhist scriptures of the Pali Canon that people cannot take anything with them when they die, except for whatever merit and demerit they have accumulated, which will then affect their future. Now in Vancouver in 2024, Rinpoche told a story of a time he was giving alms to a monk in Thailand, which is a very traditional way to generate merit. So I'd like to offer a little more context for people who are not so familiar with the culture of Buddhist countries. And perhaps contrary to popular conception, merit making is done by both monastics and lay people. So the monks earn merit through mindfulness, meditation, chanting, and other rituals. And for lay people, giving is fundamentally the most common way of making merit. Because monks, for example, are not allowed to cook by themselves, So giving food is a very common practice. Monastics in turn practice to be a good field of merit and make merit by teaching those who give, the donors. So merit making thus creates a symbiotic relationship between the lay people and the Sangha. And the Sangha is obligated to be accessible to lay people for them to be able to make merit. And giving can be done in many ways. Some lay people offer food, others offer robes and supplies, others fund ceremonies, build monasteries, or maybe persuade a relative to ordain as a monk. Young people will often temporarily ordain as monks because they believe this will not only yield fruits of merit for themselves, but also for their parents who've allowed them to ordain. In China, Thailand, India, it used to be common to offer land or the first harvest to a monastery. And through Buddhist history, people were so intent on merit making and giving that in some societies people would even offer themselves and their families to Buddhist temples. For example, in the ancient Pagan kingdom in Burma. There's a story of the king Mahakuli Mahatissa, who's a 1st century BC Sri Lankan king, who even disguised himself as a peasant and started to earn his living working on a paddy field so that he would be able to gain merit by himself giving rice to Buddhist monks. And in some cases, merit making is even considered to continue after a person's death. For example, in ancient Thai tradition, it was considered meritorious for people to dedicate their corpses to feed wild animals after death. And likewise, there are many stories of the Buddha's own merit-making actions in his previous lives, for example in the Jataka tales. So, cultivation of merit is motivated by both personal and altruistic aspirations. And perhaps as beginners, we may engage in merit-making perhaps more with the motivation to improve our own circumstances, for example, ensuring a better rebirth or experiencing less suffering. But over time, as we cultivate broader aspirations, especially in the Mahayana tradition, our accumulation of merit becomes more focused on enabling progress towards enlightenment for the sake of all beings. So the intention behind meritorious actions evolves, reflecting our deepening commitment to the welfare of others. So going back to our mountain climbing example, excuse me, merit making is I would say a specifically Buddhist idea which doesn't have a direct analogy in the West, but perhaps we might consider a positive energy or recognition gained from the climb. We might think of it as assets or maybe even capital. By undertaking the climb with good intentions, by respecting nature or others along the way, the climber accumulates goodwill and respect from the community, which is like a form of merit. And this supports the climber's future endeavors, much like a Buddhist would accumulate favorable conditions for spiritual progress. And while the word assets, I think, typically connotates material things, we can also include it to have things like goodwill, reputation, networks, trust, or capital in the sense of beyond financial capital, but social capital, emotional capital, this sense of accumulated value that is supporting our future good actions. Finally, benefit is all about impact. So benefit in Buddhism is understood as the positive impact of our actions, our practices, our path, both on ourselves and others. It can encompass both immediate welfare and happiness generated by virtuous actions, as well as longer-term spiritual benefits accruing from practices towards enlightenment. And this is closely linked to the idea of our day-to-day intentions. So in our intentions, we're very much invited to think of the benefit that each action will have, both for others and for ourselves. And so we're aiming for outcomes that are promoting harmony, reducing suffering, and contributing to spiritual development. And this intention to benefit all beings is very much, again, a hallmark of the Mahayana path. So back to the mountain climbing example, benefit here would be both the journey itself, the strength, the resilience, the personal growth about going on the journey, and then finally whatever benefit we might have by reaching the summit, especially if we are climbing, for example, for a charitable cause. So merit is very much the foundation for our path, for any significant spiritual journey. It creates the conditions necessary for us to practice the Dharma effectively and for ultimately achieving enlightenment. Benefit then is the expression. Acting with intention to benefit others is the natural expression of our Buddhist path. And there is a cyclical relationship between these two. We generate merit through virtuous actions, which leads to benefit, which further supports us creating further meritorious actions. Okay, so with this as a background or context, let's turn to the verses. 47 and 48 first. So in this section, the structural outline in the commentaries have two sections. Firstly, the benefits of making aspirations in general, which is these first two verses. So I'll read them. Whoever hears this king of dedication prayers and yearns for supreme enlightenment, who even once arouses faith, will gain true merit greater still than by offering the victorious Buddhas infinite pure realms in every directions, all ornamented with jewels, or offering them all the highest joys of gods and humans for as many aeons as there are atoms in those realms. So this is a profound statement, right? We're saying that reciting this prayer is far greater than infinite vast material offerings. Even just hearing it, even just having the intention to recite this prayer, even just once, to long for the Mahayana path, the qualities of the Buddha, the Bodhisattvas, that brings enormous benefit. And Rinpoche emphasized this is not to be understood as just poetic. He said, due to the limitations of human language, he would say this is an understatement. The merit of doing an aspiration such as this is so vast, it does not fit in our small minds. Yes, we can understand it as meaning that this aspiration is powerful, or maybe even to say that it's inspiring young bodhisattvas by saying that the Buddhas have great power to fulfill our wishes and aspirations. Rinpoche said, yes, that's not the best kind of intention, but it's still good. But the best intention, he said, the best understanding, is that the contents of this aspiration are not ordinary. Right? It's based on the grandest view, the grandest motivation, the inconceivability, the vastness of bodhicitta. And so there's two different ways in which this is not ordinary. Actually, there are two different aspects of bodhicitta, the relative and the ultimate. Firstly, we're not aspiring for worldly change, just improving one's situation in the world. We're aspiring for bodhicitta, right? A non-ordinary aspiration. As Rinpoche has often said, we're all aspiring for something anyway, so this kind of shift will gradually divert our mental, emotional, physical time and energy towards the path and towards our transformation. Even just the aspiration for benefiting others rather than just ourselves, even that, I think, is quite different from our ordinary worldly way of seeing things. I mean, even the Theravada has aspirations for better rebirths, but I think many people start out wishing it just for themselves. So, and we'll talk more on this in future weeks, part of what makes the Mahayana Maha, grand, is this idea it's for all sentient beings. I think the second way in which the content of this aspiration is not ordinary is the view, right, the ultimate bodhicitta, which is inconceivable. So we'll come next week to prostration, for example, where because of this view of emptiness, we can simultaneously prostrate to all the Buddhas of past, present, and future, and thereby multiply the benefit of our action infinitely. So, for example, when we talked in the Gandharva Sutra of Sudana's journey, in Bodhisattva Maitreya's body, he saw in a single pore of his body, he could see infinite Buddha fields. And in each of these infinite Buddha fields, he saw infinite Buddhas with infinite disciples and infinite retinues. So just to emphasize, emptiness is not about nothingness or voidness. Rather, it's fullness, vastness, inconceivability. As Rinpoche said, in one lotus, it's understanding there are infinite lotuses, and within each of these, there are limitless and inconceivable numbers of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And the Mahayana and the Madhyamaka, it is said, because of emptiness, everything is possible. That's what allows us to simultaneously prostrate to all the Buddhas of all the times and multiply our merit. And as Rinpoche taught in Bodh Gaya last year, for those who can understand this non-dual view set out in the Avatamsaka Sutra, they don't need to go through all these details of the Buddha being born 2,500 years ago and so on. If we can understand this non-dual view, then just as the Bodhisattva Sudana could see all his activities of past, present and future in a single moment, likewise all that we do here, whether it's starting with our practice early in the morning, going through our day right to the evening, it can all be accomplished in a single moment. So although we speak about elaborations of time and space, there's no such thing as past or present or future in the ultimate sense. So there's no reason why this vast aspiration cannot be accomplished. Now, if we can really understand the emptiness and inconceivability that is the heart of this prayer, if we can transcend our ordinary understanding of space and time, we can thereby transcend the merit of all our ordinary offerings. I would also say, for those of you who've received teachings on this prayer before or read other commentaries, I think one thing that Rinpoche's teachings are quite different is that many of the Mahayana commentaries really follow the causal path, which is the Mahayana path, where we engage in good actions, we cultivate causes for a future result. But Rinpoche much more is teaching from the Vajrayana or the Dzogchen perspective of the results path. We're already looking from the perspective of the Buddha's eye view of reality. Hence this cosmic perspective. So it's not just about engaging in training and aspiration for a future result of enlightenment. It is starting from the firm conviction that all sentient beings are already enlightened, and we just have to wake up to that reality. So just to summarize these two verses, even one moment of genuine faith is greater than vast material offerings. Why is this? Because of the intention behind our aspirations, our heartfelt wish for the ultimate well-being of all beings touches the very heart of the Mahayana aspiration. It aligns with our deepest, boundless compassion and wisdom, and catalyzes the profound transformation within us and in the world around us. And when we think of helping or benefiting others, Dharma is the highest offering. So while traditional Buddhist practices include making many kinds of material offerings, symbolizing generosity or renunciation, the teachings emphasize the highest offering is that of the Dharma. In other words, actions that cultivate wisdom, compassion, and aspiration for enlightenment are those that carry the greatest merit. Because although material offerings help us reduce attachment, express devotion, and practically help other beings, these aspirations, like this prayer, directly transforms our mind, aligning it with the altruistic intention that is essential for Buddhahood. So again, let us reflect on our own aspirations. When we're reciting this prayer, it's not merely reciting words. We're cultivating a boundless field of merit within our own hearts. And it's not just to accelerate our own path to enlightenment, but sows the seeds of potential for awakening in countless other beings. Okay, so verse 49. Now actually the next few verses from 49 to 53 in the outline talks about the 13 benefits in detail. And this verse, verse 49, has the first 3 of those benefits. So let me read the verse. Whoever truly makes this aspiration to good actions will never again be born in the lower realms. They will be free from harmful companions and soon behold the Buddha of boundless light. So Rinpoche gave some commentary on each of these. Interestingly, when he was teaching this in Taiwan in 2016, he said, if you aspire according to this prayer, it guarantees you will abandon all the lower realms. And here he was taking, I will almost say, a faith-based approach to teaching this practice. He said, I really believe this, almost to the extent that I sometimes become lazy. But then again, it's not really laziness either. I really believe, because I've prayed, and I've also heard the Pranidhana Raja, I will be okay. This life and next life, and at the time of my death, I'll be okay. I'm sure some intellectuals will say I'm just going through some very blind tripping. Even so, I will die much more peacefully than them. And trusting this is a blessing of the Buddha. If you're a follower of Mahayana Buddhism and you're a regular visitor to Mount Omeshan, for instance, you should also feel happy. And Umeshan or Emeshan is Mount Eme, which is near Chengdu in China, which is the highest of the 4 sacred Buddhist mountains of China, which is traditionally regarded as the Bodhimanda, or place of enlightenment of Samantabhadra. So here Rinpoche was pushing, I guess unusually for us, as blind faith as perhaps even being more useful than rational skepticism. Because if one can spend one's life in rational skepticism, one may never actually engage in the practice. It can actually block us from cultivating merit. So yes, skepticism is highly encouraged in Buddhism when doing the analysis, when establishing the view, but when it comes to practice, we're really encouraged to engage wholeheartedly with devotion and faith. It's much more useful to us to actually get on with our practice. Yeah, and for all of us, establishing and refining our view is also going to take us a while. It may take many years. So much better to start our practice with an imperfect view rather than to spend many years refining our intellectual understanding and not getting down to practice. It's also said in the commentaries that this first benefit also speaks to how this prayer gives freedom from being reborn in lower realms. And so traditionally, especially in Tibet, when somebody dies, one of the first things that is done is to recite this aspiration prayer to prevent them from lower rebirths. Right? So that's also a practice you can do for deceased people in your life. This is a great prayer to practice. Okay, the second part of this verse, the second benefit, and here I'm saying, talking about bad friends, this doesn't necessarily mean somebody who distracts you by taking you to the movies or things like that. Rather, it's someone who derails you from having interest and devotion towards this view of emptiness. Someone who makes you lack confidence in concepts such as in one lotus flower there are 25 lotuses containing infinite Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Right? In other words, it's having friends who derail your interest or devotion or willingness to practice Dharma. And the reason why others may be non-virtuous is because they don't have this kind of aspiration. And our aspiration is big. Once you have this kind of attitude, you automatically abandon sort of small-minded or petty-minded non-virtuous friends. Okay, the third part of the verse is about Amitabha. Rinpoche said there's many different ways we can think about Amitabha Buddha. And generally, for example, in the Sukhavati prayer written by Raga Asa, we say that Amitabha is red in color, he resides in the western direction. But actually, if you think about his name, the Buddha of limitless light. This is talking about the inconceivable nature, once again, the heart of this prayer. So just remembering his name, his form, his color, through that aspiration, we can accomplish our wishes. So this verse 49 in summary is not just about avoiding harm, it's about transformation. By distancing ourselves from harmful associations and inclinations, we open our hearts to the influence of the enlightened intention of all the Buddhas, symbolized here by Amitabha Buddha. And the vision of Amitabha is not just a visual encounter, it actually represents the awakening of our inherent Buddha nature, the first experience where we are touched by that on the path, illuminating our path with compassion and with wisdom. Okay, verse 50. So this is benefits 4 to 7. We read the verse. They will acquire all kinds of benefits and live in happiness. Even in this present life, all will go well, and before long, they will become just like Samantabhadra. So here the benefits. Number 4 is gaining beneficial factors. Number 5, not explicit in the verse, is having good health. Number 6 is having good fortune in this life, which is all about having good conditions so we can better benefit others and do our practice. And number 7 is we shall all become like Samantabhadra. So Hiramshe said, all other prayers, according to the Pranidhana Raja, are considered relative prayers. For example, even in Buddhism, there are many prayers for long life, but these are considered conventional or subjective. What is long? 1 minute could be long. And is long even good? Would it even benefit us to benefit 1,000 years or 10,000 years? Right? Likewise, we might pray for prosperity or success. And as he said, you can still do these prayers. There's nothing wrong with them. But if you forget the ultimate aspiration to enlighten all beings, these relative aspirations alone will not lead you anywhere. They're not bodhicitta. And our aim as Buddhists is to get out of samsara, not just to improve our status in the relative materialistic world. So he also talked about how for a prayer to work, we need to be able to trust that there is some kind of basis or foundation for the prayer. So he talked also that when we say a perfect aspiration, it means it has to yield or generate a perfect result. And this is considered in Mahayana to be the only aspiration that will give a perfect fruition or result. The idea of may I be free from ignorance, may I free all beings from ignorance, that is worthy because it is achievable, right? Much more than long life or wealth. Rinpoche said, may all beings be enlightened, very much achievable. Saying may they all become Buddhist, that's not necessarily achievable, not necessarily even a good thing. So why do we say there is a foundation for this? What is our reason for believing in this aspiration? And the reason that we have confidence in bodhicitta is because ignorance and defilements are not our true nature. Right? Here we're talking about Buddha nature. So we don't spend a lot of time on that in this prayer, but in other Mahayana texts, such as the Uttara Tantra, a lot of time is spent establishing the basis, the understanding of Buddha nature. And there's, 3 ways we can approach this. First is just having faith and devotion in the Buddha, the 3 jewels, devotion to the teacher. So even if we may not fully understand it, just having that faith and devotion is already a useful foundation for us. Secondly, we can study the Mahayana texts, the Madhyamika, the Uttara Tantra, to give us confidence in emptiness and Buddha nature as the basis. And thirdly, as we begin to practice, we can start to get confidence based on our own experience. We can start to realize we are not angry or jealous all of the time. Right? There are times when our awareness is clear, when our aspiration is positive. Right? So we realize that our negative emotions, our defilements, are not our true nature. They're like dirt on top of a window. Right? The window itself is clean. So just getting really clear then that we have a window that is clean. The window can be cleaned. Now, that's the confidence that allows us to aspire, not just for our own enlightenment, for the enlightenment of all beings. Another aspect Rinpoche touched on here is non-duality, right? Saying again, we might think, may all beings be enlightened. That feels like it's going to take many, many aeons, forever. And what do we mean by all? So here he said, let's not forget the Mahayana interpretation. So back to the Gandavyuha Sutra and the journey of Sudana, when he met, for example, Indriyashvaya, the 8-year-old boy, who gave him a teaching on numbers. And as Rinpoche said, after going through all of these numbers, he asks, what is the meaning of one? 1, 100, 1,000, 100,000. There is no difference. They're all illusory, they're all relative, all imputed by habitual patterns. As Rinpoche said, you really need to know this element. So for a Mahayana student then, aspiring may all become awakened or enlightened is much more doable than may there be world peace. As he said, world peace, very much not so easy, but everyone becoming enlightened, very possible, easy. Also, in this context of the only true or reliable or solid aspiration being the ultimate aspiration of bodhicitta, enlightening all beings, just this notion that even in the relative world, we may wish to do good for others, but our ability to know what is actually going to be good is quite difficult. Right? We may do something with good intentions, but it may have bad outcomes. Right? So just as an example, there's a famous story of the Chinese farmer. Here I'll give you the version by Alan Watts. So once upon a time, there was a Chinese farmer who lost a horse, ran away, and all the neighbors came round that evening and said, "That's too bad." And he said, "Maybe." The next day, the horse came back and brought 7 wild horses with it. And all the neighbors came round and said, "Why, that's great, isn't it?" And he said, "Maybe." The next day, his son, who was attempting to tame one of these horses, was riding it and was thrown and broke his leg. And all the neighbors came round in the evening and said, "Well, that's too bad, isn't it?" And the farmer said, "Maybe." And the next day the conscription officers came looking for people for the army, and they rejected his son because he had a broken leg. And all the neighbors came round in the evening and said, "Isn't that wonderful?" And he said, "Maybe." So the whole process of nature is an integrated process of immense complexity. It's really impossible to tell whether anything that happens in it is good or bad, because you never know what will be the consequences. You never know what's going to be good fortune or misfortune. So as Rinpoche said, we should always aspire as Manjushri or Samantabhadra, acknowledging that only they fully understand the function of cause, condition, effect. So once again, the fourth point, wishing for good things. Here we consider good things are things that support our Dharma practice and the practice of others and the path to enlightenment. So things like encountering a qualified teacher, encountering virtuous friends who have devotion and interest in the teachings. In Vajrayana Buddhism, it's traditionally known as the 18 freedoms and advantages that, for example, if we do Nundra practice, right at the beginning we contemplate how we have a precious human birth, and there the preciousness of a human birth is considered in terms of these 18 freedoms and advantages. And so again, good things are what is conducive to our study and practice of Dharma. And that can also be outer things such as health and wealth. It's difficult to practice Dharma if we don't have the right outer conditions. And yes, of course, we still wish to accomplish relative benefit in this world, including socially, politically, and so forth. But ideally, it's always with this spirit of creating conditions for self and others to practice Dharma, to encounter the teachings and put them into practice. And here also, we'll typically start with more relative understanding of what it is to do good and what creates merit, and progress as we understand emptiness more deeply from ordinary generosity to parameters of generosity. And we'll see this in more detail with next week's teachings on the first 12 verses, where we're talking about foundations. And again, foundations to practice this prayer as a whole, to be able to cultivate the aspiration, but in particular, as we proceed in this prayer, it will increasingly delve into inconceivability, emptiness, non-duality, and for us to really understand that, to put that into practice, that really requires vast merit. So a lot of what we want to do is establish and cultivate merit for that. So Rinpoche also commented on living well. He said, why do we consider that we live well? Well, because we have a grand vision. A little bit of a scratch here, a little bit of something broken or dented there, it won't bother us anymore. Our grand vision, grand view, grand plan, a little failure here or there means nothing. So we sleep well, we live well. Whereas if we're thinking just of limited worldly things, we have so much to worry about. And as he said, we all know we've done quite a lot of this worrying business, and it's not going to end. So, a summary of verse 50, it's really bringing our attention to the here and now, promising happiness and cultivation of bodhisattva qualities within our current existence. And this immediate transformation is crucial. As we embody compassion, wisdom, and the other bodhisattva qualities, our lives also become a beacon of hope and guidance for others. Our happiness becomes increasingly intertwined with the happiness of all beings, demonstrating that enlightenment is not just a distant goal, but a present reality that we can cultivate through our aspirations and actions. Okay, so 51. And this is the 8th of the 13 benefits. All negative acts, even the 5 of immediate retribution, whatever they have committed in the grip of ignorance, will soon be completely purified if they recite this aspiration to good actions. Right, so traditionally these 5 acts of immediate retribution of killing one's father, killing one's mother, killing an arhat, maliciously drawing blood from the body of a tathagata, or creating a schism in the sangha. And these are traditionally in Buddhism considered the most severe of negative deeds. But here the verse is saying that all karmic defilements would be purified, including these. Right, this is normally considered extremely difficult, something that can only be accomplished through the antidote of applying non-dual wisdom. But here we're saying, just through reciting this prayer, it is possible. And Rinpoche taught, this is because karma is fundamentally a mental phenomenon. As Buddha said, everything is cause and condition, and of all the causes and conditions, motivation is the most powerful. So generating a grand aspiration can immediately manipulate the past, present, and future karma. So transforming our mind is about transforming karma. So this verse really offers us profound hope. No matter what the weight of our past actions, sincere aspirations can cleanse the slate. Right? This really underscores the transformative power of intention and aspiration. So although our karma is shaped by countless past actions, we can transform it through the genuine wish for enlightenment for ourselves and all beings. And this purification is not just erasing the past, but it's a deep transformation, turning our past into a fertile ground for the blossoming of our Buddha nature. Okay, verse 52. So this has benefits numbers 9 through 12. They will possess perfect wisdom, beauty, and excellent signs, be born in a good family and with a radiant appearance. Demons and heretics will never harm them, and all three worlds will honor them with offerings. So, on wisdom, Rinpoche said, you can understand wisdom as the ability to discern what is good and bad, what is to be adopted, what is to be abandoned, what is Dharma, what is not Dharma, and so forth. Of course, wisdom in Mahayana also includes knowing the non-self of the person and of all phenomena, so non-duality. Therefore, the attitude or way of thinking that contradicts dualistic clinging. But here we can also understand it as the exhaustion of the ordinary mind and mental events. And not a state of being completely empty or void, but rather luminosity or clarity. So it's the union of clarity and luminosity, or clarity and emptiness. And as an ordinary practitioner, Rinpoche said, the best method to actualize this kind of wisdom is aspiration. And through reciting this prayer, one of the most supreme accomplishments is indeed wisdom, which is one of the most supreme skills for us, skillful means, paramitas, to benefit other beings. And again, as we've said, we may, if we're dualistic, if we don't have wisdom, we may feel discouraged, right? We may think we can only benefit a handful of beings. And even if we're only trying to benefit one or a couple of beings, when things don't go as planned, or when people don't appreciate our efforts, we may get discouraged. As young bodhisattvas, we may get weary, fatigued. And so, here in this prayer, the bodhisattva's aspiration is to keep aspiring, to keep practicing as long as there are sentient beings up to the utmost infinite limits of the universe. During the questions and answers in Vancouver, Rinpoche said a couple of times to questions about disappointment. He said the best antidote for disappointment is having an infinite aspiration. So very much cultivating this wisdom of non-duality, inconceivability, vastness, which we're going to come back to in future weeks. And in this sphere or context of wisdom, there is no difference between benefiting one being or an infinity of beings. So as we'll talk about more in future weeks, it's shifting from a focus just on a limited goal to a path, right, where every moment of our journey is infused with this. Right? Or for those of you who know the idea of finite and infinite games, right, it's about thinking of our life not as some kind of finite game with a finite goal, but really an infinite game. And we'll talk more about that. Right, this verse also talks about radiant appearance. Right, the skillful means to manifest different bodies, attributes, caste, clan, colors, attributes, signs. Right, so this could include mundane things like fame or prosperity or relationships, which can indeed be accomplished also through mundane and mediocre aspirations. But in this case, the bodhisattva aspires for these things, not for these mundane reasons, but because of his or her desire to benefit beings. Right? A bodhisattva uses different colors, different shapes, different forms to better inspire beings, to reach them, to teach the Dharma. So again, our aspiration for improving our relative conditions is not for ourselves, but so that we can better study, practice, share, teach the Dharma. Right? It's only in as much as it's to benefit others. And of course, there's a real challenge here in keeping ourselves honest. Now, some of you may have followed recently what happened with the whole crypto implosion of FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried, right? The whole effective altruism movement, where they have an idea that you can earn to give, right? And I think sometimes people may think of their own lives that way. Let me cultivate wealth, good conditions now so that I can better give it away in the future. But there's always a real danger we can fool ourselves, right? As Rinpoche says, he quotes the songs of Milarepa, "My religion is not deceiving myself and not disturbing others." Or for those of you who watch the movie Oppenheimer, Richard Feynman, the Nobel physicist, he said, the first principle is that you must not fool yourself. and you are the easiest person to fool. Yeah, so just always being mindful when we say to ourselves, oh yes, I want relative good so that I can benefit others. Just check your intention, right? Is it really to benefit others, or are you just fooling yourself? This idea of being venerated by the three worlds, yeah, it's not just because of, you have some position which is going to go away. It's because you become a living embodiment of the bodhisattva aspiration of bodhicitta. Your qualities, your kindness, your goodness, that will become visible, omnipresent wherever you go, and therefore you will be venerated and respected by beings. Okay, verse 53, the last of the benefits. They will quickly go beneath the Bodhi tree, and there they will sit to benefit all sentient beings. Then awaken into enlightenment, turn the wheel of Dharma, and tame Mara with all his hordes. And here Rinpoche said, this is the most beautiful part. Now the Bodhisattva goes to the Bodhi tree, sits, actualizes Buddhahood, and then turns the wheel of the Dharma. So remember, our aspiration here ultimately is bodhicitta, right? It's to achieve enlightenment for ourselves so that we can then benefit all other beings. So, again, this verse emphasizes enlightenment is not an end, but a beginning. The start of an unending commitment to turn the wheel of the Dharma and tame the forces that bind us and all beings to suffering. So as we contemplate these verses, always remember our transformation, our aspiration is not for our benefit alone, but it's the key to unlocking the boundless potential for compassion, wisdom, and liberation of all beings. Okay, the final verse of this week, 54, which is the benefits in brief. The full result of keeping, teaching, or reading this prayer of aspiration to good actions is known to the Buddhas alone. Have no doubt, supreme enlightenment will be yours. And here Rinpoche said, never doubt the Bodhisattva path. Don't worry about the fact you may struggle to benefit even one being, a friend or a spouse or a child, and therefore you wonder how could you benefit all sentient beings. Don't worry, because just carrying this text, right, just flipping through the text without really much concentration, just that, the merit is infinite. As Rinpoche said, do not doubt these words, because we're talking about a mental act based on a vast aspiration. So this verse offers us a profound assurance. By keeping, teaching, even reading this aspiration, we align ourselves with a path that is known and blessed by the Buddhas. It's not just an encouraging sentiment, it's a testament to the power of aspiration. When grounded in faith, motivated by the altruistic wish for the enlightenment of all beings, and inspired by the wisdom of the Buddhas, our path to enlightenment becomes inevitable. This assurance invites us to engage deeply with the prayer, confident in the knowledge that our efforts are supported by the compassionate wishes of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And so let's this assurance fuel our commitment to the Mahayana path, inspiring us to embody these aspirations in all our thoughts, words, and deeds. Okay, so in closing, again, I just want to invite you to really make this prayer into a regular daily practice, even if it's just a few moments each day. Even if, as the prayer itself suggests, you just carry it around in your briefcase or your handbag. Perhaps consider keeping some kind of journal to reflect on how these verses are speaking to your current experiences and aspirations, and noticing any shifts or deepening of commitment as you go through these weeks. And really nurture a Mahayana aspirational mindset in your daily activities. Right? See the opportunity for living these verses in day-to-day action. Challenge yourself to view situations through the view or lens of a bodhisattva. How can I bring compassion to this interaction? How can my actions reflect my deepest aspirations for the benefit of all beings? Even simple acts of kindness, moments of patience in the face of irritation, gestures of generosity can become expressions of our bodhisattva vow. Remember, it's in the seemingly mundane day-to-day activities that our greater spiritual growth can occur. And so as we conclude this week, let's carry forwards the understanding that these aspirational verses are far more than just personal wishes for spiritual growth. They are acts of universal benevolence. Each recitation, each moment of reflection strengthens not only our own path to enlightenment, but also contributes to the vast interconnected web of awakening that encompasses all beings. The path we walk is paved with the aspirations and practices of countless bodhisattvas before us, and with each step we extend that same support to all who follow. May our engagement with these teachings inspire us to live with boundless compassion, unwavering patience, and deep wisdom, dedicating every thought, word, action to the enlightenment of all beings. So thank you for sharing our journey this week, and may the merit of our collective aspirations benefit all beings, leading us together to the shore of perfect awakening. So with that, I wish you a good week, and I will see you again next week.